Okay, welcome everybody to Mastering Scheduling. My name, of course, is Kelly Bennett. I think most of you know me, Kelly the Coach. Just a bit of a history. I started my business actually in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, 1987. I actually started with a webinar, sorry, not a webinar. I've got webinar on the brain. I started with a workshop called Starting a Successful Business, and I'd written a workshop and I traveled across Canada, eventually to 153 different cities, teaching people how to start a business for a living, and I did that from 1987 till about 1992. Did a huge amount of traveling, and I'd also written a workshop on financial management, another one on business plan, and a couple on sales and marketing. And I received a phone call from the University College of the Fraser Valley in Kelowna, British Columbia, asking me if I could do what I did for the automotive industry. And so I'll date myself even a little bit more. I was a service advisor in Calgary in 1978, 79, and 80. It was a gas station, Texaco actually. I'm dating myself with that too because we don't have Texaco in Canada anymore because of a little bit of a lawsuit. They sold off Canada's Texacos to pay off a large lawsuit, if you remember that. I remember gas was 16.7 cents a liter, and so for Americans on board, that's about 60 cents, a little less than 60 cents a gallon. So gas was a lot cheaper, so I'm dating myself. But I ran a workshop for the University College of the Fraser Valley for automotive, and then now that's exclusively what I do. So I've worked mainly in the United States. I wrote an article, a monthly article for a magazine in Canada at the time called Canadian Technician, and a lot of people in Canada know me from that article, and ran huge amounts of training all across the United States. Eventually got to all 50 states. Traveling is, you know, if you do a lot of it, is completely exhausting. And so it's kind of nice now to be doing focus mainly on webinars, although I'm still doing live training, just not as much of it. This particular workshop is the second in the series that we started just a little while ago called Good to Great Service Advising. And for those of you that weren't here last week for the last session, this is essentially the start of a 5-day live service advisor class that I used to teach. I taught it for Bob O'Connor, who was my mentor back in the early 90s, learning the automotive management stuff. And I ran many of the 5-day classes for him. And I decided to take the 5-day training program and put it into segments of 1.5-hour webinars. So how long it'll go, I don't know exactly because it's hard to tell. When you're doing sessions live, of course, there's a lot more interaction and such, and coffee breaks, and so it's not going to be full 5 days of 90-minute workshops, but I'm suspecting it'll be at least 30 different segments. So this is segment number 2, and it's called Good to Great Service Advising. And the second topic that I chose is called scheduling, or mastering scheduling. I was searching for images on the internet, and I saw this one, the service advisor, with the t-shirt that says "Only because freaking awesome is not an official job title," and I just thought, hey, that would make a good way to open up the workshop. Service advisors, we looked at it last week. You're definitely in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle, and hopefully since that session you've changed a few things at the shop. And one of the things we looked at was reducing the stress of an advisor, because you're the one that has to communicate with the customers and get them off the phone into the shop, communicate with the customer when they're standing at your counter, and then of course you've got to communicate with the technicians and communicate with the owner or manager of that business, unless of course you're the owner, manager, service advisor, and technician, and that's a whole different workshop that we actually choose to provide some medication with. Kevin, just so you know, Kevin King is on the line with us. I'm trying to unmute him, and I'm not sure why it's not working. And he's going to be letting me know if there's any issues with sound or anything like that. Just so you know, down in the message section, you can chat. If you've got a question, please feel free to send a message there. And mainly we're going to do a question and answer period at the end. But if you do have questions in the interim, please feel free to type them in there. And if you've got any comments about sound or something, I think we've got the sound figured out. I have a new pop filter that I just bought since the last session and today, and a new microphone stand. So definitely getting it together with better and better technology. And oh, thank you. See, there's where I need the help. Nothing is being shared. I have to remember to hit that button. So scheduling, good to great. And I was just showing you that t-shirt that I put on the workbook. I just decided to add that today. I thought that was pretty cool. Service advisors are close to my heart. Certainly when you're running a shop, I know that there's a lot of technicians who think that the service advisor's job is easy. When I was writing service, we had a technician. His name was Ben. I don't know if anybody's ever met a technician with an attitude, but he certainly had one. And one day he said to me, it must be nice to have such a cushy job and just talk on the phone all day. And I thought, do you want to try this? Do you want to come up to the counter and try this? Cars can't yell at you. They can't scream at you. They can't accuse you of ripping them off. They can't swear at you, whereas human beings can be unpredictable. But of course, customers can be awesome, and I think most customers are reasonable. I did send you the workbook, and you don't always have to print this off, but if you choose to, you certainly can in advance. And I'm going to go through the exact workbook that was sent out, and like last time, the session will be sent to you, the link to it sent to you tomorrow. It's actually done, uploaded to my YouTube channel, and then I send you a private link. So if people search for it, they can't find it, but you definitely have a private link. So I just want to go through this. I want to start with the whole idea of scheduling. And I do think that most shops don't have a car count problem. I think most shops have a problem making every car count. And there's a huge difference between the two. And I don't just mean year-round. I'm talking about some seasonal things as well. My experience is that a lot of people are super, super busy in November. They just go absolutely crazy. And of course, I have taught all across the US and Canada. The bulk of my training actually has been in the US, about 90% of it, and a lot of that was Southern US. So I have a lot of people following down there. And of course, they don't know what winter tire season is. Heck, they don't even know what cars being plugged in. I got to tell you, I was down in Southern California once, and this guy said, what do you do with how cold it gets? And I said, well, we plug in our cars and it heats up the block heater. He goes, well, you have to have long extension cords. And I thought, you're kidding, right? I said, oh yeah, it's a mess. You go to the highways in the wintertime and there's extension cords everywhere, and we try to color code them. And anyway, I don't know if he thought we drove around with them plugged in or not, but I won't question his intelligence. He just didn't understand. But my experience is that, and again, there's a lot of people in Canada that have contacted me and say, this is too busy of a time of year, but we need to understand that it's not just shops that have a huge tire rush that we do training for. And of course, these sessions are recorded so people can come back to them later on. But the problem right now, my experience is, if you are in an area where there's a lot of tire season, currently I'm in Vancouver, I just arrived last night, and tire season is kind of sort of just kicking off here. And I'm going to take a stab at it and say maybe only 50% of people actually put winter tires on the car. We have some people in Quebec, and of course the law is you must have winter tires on your car. Most people, and of course in Ontario, do. I think Calgary's probably higher, maybe 80% of people. But the problem is when you've got those busy times, whether it's November or December, the problem is you can get so focused in putting all those tires on cars that your sales peak, but your gross profit actually decreases. And in one of the management groups that I was running, we looked at seasonality, and we'd look at the sales of shops and other key performance indicators as well. We looked at some of those last time, but we'd also look at gross profit. But I was looking at one particular shop in Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada, and of course there's a huge winter tire issue there, and most people of course put winter tires on. And one particular shop, his sales went through the roof in November, just spike all the way up. But I looked at his February and his spike went all the way down. And I know it sounds like you can't have more than 100% variance, and going from zero, you're right, you can't go from zero to an excess of 100%. But if you're down, way down, like 40% lower in sales, and then the next thing you know, your November is 80%, then of course you're over 100. And I was looking at his February, which was the worst month of the year, and it was November, which was the best month of the year for sales. But I looked at the gross profit percentage, and November, and I don't exaggerate, November was the second largest gross profit of the entire season. So that's crazy because we got so focused on getting the car in and out, in and out, in and out with the tires that we didn't actually have an opportunity to have the person do other work that needed to be done. Now I'm just going to turn off my screen sharing for just a minute here, and I'm going to send you this particular handout that I'm going to show right now. And I didn't want to send it in advance per se, to print it off. I'm not sure what we were going to cover with it, but we're going to take a look at sales as it relates to how much a customer spends in a year at their shop. And oddly enough, that didn't open up. How much does the average consumer spend on their car in a year? And I think that's an important calculation, because what we want to do is find out how much the average customer is spending at our shop. So I'm going to encourage you between now and the next time we talk is to find out what the average person spends at your shop in any given year. And for some reason, it's not allowing me to open that up, and I'm not really sure why, and I'm not going to work with that. But the average consumer, just so you know, in Canada spends $1,200 a year repairing a 12-plus old vehicle. Or sorry, I apologize, $1,200 a year repairing an average vehicle. And that's average. Of course, newer cars are going to spend less. Older cars are going to spend more. But the average person actually does spend approximately $1,200 a year with all makes and models. If we look at mainly what we work on as independents, we typically work on older cars. If you've never tracked it, you'd like to find out what the average year is of cars that you work on. You'd like to be able to see, is it 4-year-old stuff, 8-year-old stuff, 10, what the highest is. You can see, what percentage you work on that are 1-year-old and what percentage are 2, etc. But so with the cars that we work on, it's actually more closer to $1,600 a year that a person actually spends. And actually, I was able to pull this up. Okay, so as I just mentioned, the average person spends $1,200, just under $1,200. It's $1,180. And the average person in a year, now this is Canada based on 2012. My experience is it's not much different in the United States. Person spends $10,452 on average on a car. And this is based on 18,000 miles, or kilometers, I should say, of driving per year. It'd be about 15,000 miles, I think. And let's take a look at the breakdown. And I think this is important, and I've actually had some people who took this and put it on a sign in their shop. Or what I like is when you go to a shop and they have a screen, let's say with a PowerPoint, and what it's doing is rotating some information, so you're educating the customer at the same time, and you can see what they are, the information about the shop. You don't want to just have TV blaring all the time. But it's kind of nice for the customer to know. The highest amount is depreciation. A car depreciates approximately $3,364 or $3,634 or 20 cents a kilometer, every single kilometer depreciating. Fuel costs are not that bad. That's $1,821 a year or 10 cents a kilometer. And at the time, you can see on the bottom there, fuel was $1.23 a liter. Some places in Canada, I bought gas the other day at Costco, 78 cents. I'm back in Vancouver, and it's a little over $1. So this is pretty accurate even for today. Finance charges is another huge amount, 7 cents a kilometer. Auto insurance is only 15 cents a K, repair is 7 cents a K, and license or registries is small, it's only 1 cent. So the average person is spending $1,180 a year. The problem is when some people come into the shop and they're just doing the tires, we're putting these tires, the winter tires on their vehicles. Our focus is on tires, 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 but it's not focused on the big picture of 7 cents a kilometer or $1,180 in a year. So when people come in, particularly at this time, this session's being recorded November of 2016, we are focused on tires, to get it in, get it off, get them on, get them off, and move on. And the sales can increase, but the gross profit usually decreases. And I want to tell you another quick story, because I find stories save a lot of time in training, and also paint the picture, I should say, of what we're looking at in big picture. I was doing some coaching for some shops in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, a few years ago, And I was driving to a shop, and it was winter, and it was a horrible storm that was going on. I lived in the country, and I thought, should I even try driving into the city? It was crazy. And I thought, well, I'm going to go anyway. And I got to the shop 7:30 when they're opening, and there was people all over the place dropping off their cars to have their tires swapped off. They had 4 technicians in the bay, 2 advisors, and I was doing my on-site, which includes interviewing the advisors, and the advisor said, look, I'm really too busy right now, I can't do this, and the other advisor was actually in the bays with the technicians doing tire swaps. So I see 5 technicians going crazy, and here's the advisor going crazy, and I said, you know what, I don't want to interrupt you, I'll come back another time and we'll do this on site because it's just not a good day to do that. I can't spend time with you talking to you. 2 weeks later, I go to the exact same shop and I'm doing my on-site, and I went to interview the technicians, and one of the technicians wasn't there. And I said, where is he? They said, oh, it's really slow. He is off. We gave him the day off because it's so slow. And I thought, how in the world could you be so busy turning away business, getting tires on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off, so busy, and 2 weeks later, completely slow? I've seen many shops. In fact, there's a lot of shops in the Ontario area where I've trained that has a high winter season. November, crazy month. February is hated. I'll talk about a client of mine. His name is Jim Voigt, and I don't exaggerate. He has revolutionized his business by changing the way he runs his business. And some of you, like Susan and Andy, you know him personally. You've met him. I think one of your advisors actually went to his shop one time during the day when we were doing a meeting to see how they pre-book appointments. And I'm going to give you an update even since then on how he's even improved since then. That was going back about 6 years ago. But Jim told me he hated Februaries. Can't stand February, hates Februaries. And I said, why do you hate February? And he said, well, my dad's dad hated February, and my dad hated February, and I hate February. It was a 3rd generation business. And my mentor, who trained me initially, Bob O'Connor, would have said, okay, so you've known about this problem for 3 generations, and you haven't done anything about it. Well, I wouldn't be that bold to say something, not quite to somebody, but I quoted Bob, and he said, I've always hated February. There's nothing you can do about it. And I can tell you without exaggeration, he started to pre-book appointments during the season of November, making people's appointments way out. You don't take care of February in February. If you're trying to take care of January when it's slow or February when it's slow, it's too late. You need to take care of it in advance. And I was speaking in Las Vegas at an event the year after he was in the training, so that was, I don't know what year it was, but he wrote me an email, and I was reading it at the Las Vegas event, and that's always the first week in November, so it would have been the very first week of the week of November. And I read an email from him, and he basically said, I no longer hate February, even though it was only November, and he already had 42 pre-booked appointments for February. And now he can tell you that February is no slower of a month than any other month. And too often what we're doing is we're waiting for the customer to get busy depending on what their needs are. And so some of the things we're going to talk about here is how to solve this problem. Anyway, back to this. The focus is to find out how much money your customer spends at your shop per vehicle. So you can go back to your software, and I encourage you to do this homework between now and the next session, and is to simply take your dollars, divide by how many cars you worked on, and see how much money is being spent per year, per person, per vehicle. So not just per person per se, but your customers' vehicles, because this is based on each individual vehicle. Are the customers spending close to this $11,800? Now, not everybody is loyal to us, and they're going to other shops as well. Sometimes we see an oil change sticker from a shop that's not ours. Sometimes we see tires put on a car that we didn't put on the car. And so, you know, not everybody's loyal. But you do want to do the homework to find out how much the average person is spending at your shop. So some homework between now and the next time. If you could find out what your average customer spends, all you need to do is take, and you want it for a full year. So you want to know of vehicles that you had in your database at least a year ago. If they just started coming to you a few months ago, that's going to throw off your math. But you want to take the dollars of sales, divide that by how many vehicles you worked on for the full year, and find out what your average customer spends. Adding to that homework related to the subject, another thing I'd like to encourage you to do is an oil change sticker program. And that means every time an oil change sticker is taken off of a vehicle, you don't have your technicians throw it away, you have them keep it. And what you want to do is track and find out exactly how many of your customers are completely loyal with their oil changes. So at the end of the month, well, I have no idea what's doing. Okay, I don't know how I could stop that, but somebody just signed in. I'll learn that. What you want to do is take off all the oil change stickers, and we suggest you do it for a month. You're not going to find out much if you just do it in a day or a week. But over the period of a month, of all the oil change stickers that were taken off of a customer's car and kept, at the end of the month, you want to add them up and see what percentage were from your shop, what percentage came from other shops. And you can get even a little fancier with that. I had a shop owner who owns 5 shops. He did it in each of his shops, and he created an Excel spreadsheet that showed the percentage of the oil change stickers that were removed from cars that were theirs, the percentage that were from dealerships, other independent repair shops, and some handmade ones that somebody had done their own oil change and had tracked it themselves. What he found out, what he thought was going to be the #1 competitor, and I should have added to that list Quick Lubes, he thought Quick Lubes that were going to be his biggest competitor. And as it turns out, his biggest competitor was actually other independent repair shops. So if you find that half your customers are going elsewhere for the oil changes, you need to find out what you can do. And when we come back in later sessions and talk about sales and marketing, we're going to talk about oil change programs to get people to become loyal. I'll just throw one out to you right now, is to sell somebody a year's worth of oil changes up front so they buy 4 oil changes. We don't suggest that you say, well, you buy 4 and you pay for 3. Don't discount it. We recommend that you actually give away something that you don't sell. So in other words, you can say if you buy this oil change package, and oil change is whatever for their car, let's say it's synthetic and it's $90 or $100. So you charge them for all 4 up front, but give them like a $25 certificate to their favorite restaurant or something. So you're giving them something as a gift, but you're not giving something cheap. Or something that you sell, and something $25 worth is nice. If $5 would be an insult. But the idea is to prevent people from going to other shops for the oil changes. Why would I go anyplace else when I've already paid you for the next year? But back to and we'll get to more of those in the marketing classes, but back to what we're talking about. What you want to do is you want to be able to find out what percentage of customers are loyal with the oil changes, came to your shop again and again, and what percentage didn't. The other thing I encourage you to do is when you take off the oil change sticker, or have the technicians do, is have them write down the mileage that was on the car at that time and the mileage that's on the sticker. So the other thing you can find out in the short little survey of your little study, is to find out what percentage of your customers are going over on their oil changes. And I've seen a number of clients, I should say, do that over the years. And it's kind of neat to educate your customers that go over and say, did you know that 40% of customers actually go over on the oil changes, or whatever it might be? And you want to design a program like pre-booked appointments to prevent them from going over on their oil changes. I think oil changes alone is enough reason to have people pre-book their next appointment. Say, I noticed that you went over 1,500 kilometers on your oil change. We'd like to prevent that from happening in the future. You drive X number of kilometers according to what we see in our database. You need an oil change approximately every 6 weeks. So we've gone ahead and made an appointment for you 6 weeks out. You don't need to give them a specific date, but what you can do is you can say the week of, and we'll talk about that a little later on, and I like the week of strategy more so than giving them a specific date. Anyway, just back to this to finish this up. Good way to educate your customer about how much they spend. For those of you that read the articles that I wrote over the years about our minivan, and I talked about the minivan that we had, and it eventually had 500,000 kilometers on it, and I got a printout from the shop management software that the shop had that I brought the vehicle to, and we actually spent just a little over 6 cents a kilometer. So what seemed like a lot of money put into that vehicle because it had 500,000 kilometers, in reality only worked out to less than what the average is. So if somebody says, well, car repair is really expensive, you can say, well, based on our shop management system, you actually spend about 6 cents a kilometer, or it's 5.8 cents a kilometer, whereas the average person drives 7. So what might seem like a lot of money is not necessarily a lot of money. The cost per kilometer is less. For example, people think transmissions are expensive. Well, they're just a lot of money. And if you calculate out what a transmission costs, how long it lasts for, over how many kilometers or miles, you'll find out that an oil change per kilometer is not much different than a transmission per kilometer. So a great way to educate the customer, but the bottom line is here is to have as many customers as possible spending the money they're going to spend anyway at our shop. And so I'm going to send that out to you after the class. And we'll go back to this. Most shops don't have a car count problem. They have a problem making every car count. And again, we see way too many peaks and valleys. Like I said, November goes crazy. February goes crazy the other direction. There are things that we can do with that. I've had people say, well, there's nothing we can do about the weather. That's true. But if we're waiting for the weather to change to get busy, we're a farmer, not a repair shop. And I'm not stupid. I mean, I know the correlation between super cold weather and the extra sales of batteries, alternators, and starters, and of course November and when the spring comes with tires. And I know that in the winter, or sorry, the summer, if it's super hot, then AC sales go up. So there are those factors of weather that change things. But our business should not be based just on those things and going up and down dependent upon what the weather is. So again, the average person spends $1,200 a year. And I just want to go through a few key points, and then we're going to start taking a look at how we pre-book next appointments. And I've taken an email that I received several years ago, actually 10 years ago, from one of my clients, and I took it and I bite-sized it to go through the data. Some of you have seen that email in the past. I've given that at classes, but I want to break it down and show you exactly what this guy's doing and how brilliant it is, and the fact that it's not some new thing that somebody started doing 3 weeks ago and it works. We're talking about people have been doing this for many years. $1,200 a year. The focus is to have the people spend that money that they're going to spend anyway. And again, with our vehicles, the data we looked at is all years, makes, and models. So that includes brand new vehicles. So when we look at vehicles that are typically 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, that number comes up to $1,600. So $1,200 is every year, make, and model. So that's more applicable maybe to a dealership that sells and works on newer vehicles. But with us, the amount is actually going to be closer to $1,600. But I wanted to show you the $1,200 because that's the survey that they did. The idea is to have the person spend that money at our shop, all of it, not going somewhere for the oil change and someplace else for their tires. We want to see people spend the money they're going to spend anyway at our shop. We're not asking to spend more. We're asking to spend more of it at our shop. The idea is to have that person, that vehicle, into the shop 3 to 4 visits a year. If we have way too many visits, then we're just nickel and diming it and only doing a little bit of work each time. And somebody's got some noise. I got to figure out how we can stop that from happening when somebody joins. The idea is to get them to spend that money. And I'm going to give you an example at our shop. And as few visits as possible, not that we'd only want to see them once a year at $1,200, but I want to give you an example. When I was working in the repair shop, which of course was also a gas station, there were people there that would buy gas $2 worth at a time. Now, of course, with gas being more expensive now, it's different, but people would literally come in and buy $2 worth of gas at a time. If I could get everybody to mute their microphones, please. You could just look on there, you see a microphone and you can mute it. I'll see if I can mute there. Okay, that should take care of that. some people would come in and buy $2 of the gas, $2 of the gas. And I don't exaggerate. Some of these people would come in every day. You'd see them almost every day. There's what we call the $2 Charlie. And that's the person that's going to buy $2 worth of gas at a time. Usually not very organized. They come in, they don't have a wallet that they pull out with their money all facing the same direction. They usually have a handful of stuff in their pocket and they pull out their money and they throw a crumbled up $2 bill or $1 bills on the counter and they leave. And one day a fellow came in that was like that. He was a $2 Charlie and he bought $5 worth of gas. I was stunned. I thought, oh, here's $2. I thought, five. I wanted to say to him, did you just get paid today? Like, wow, $5 all at once. And then there's the other people. Those are the people that come in about once a week. They usually pull up about the same time because they're kind of regimented. They pull up at about 5 after 7 in the morning, and they pull up usually to the same pump. They're hoping it's going to be available because they don't like change, and they fill up that tank, and they come in, and they pay for that, and they leave. Who's the smartest consumer? This person spending $2 at a time or $5 at a time or $10 at a time, or the person who's filling up once or twice a week. I mean, it's a much smarter thing. You're making less trips to the gas station. And of course, if you own a gas station, those $2 Charlies are harder on your equipment. Well, it's the same thing with auto repair. If a person's going to spend, and I'm going to use the number of $1,600 because that's more applicable to us as independents, they're going to spend $1,600. How do we want them to spend it? They're not going to come in and spend $1,600 once, but we certainly don't want them coming in 16 times and spending $100. And that's the way some people are. They don't budget for repair and they want to get as little done. Like, what can I get away with today? What's the bare bones you could do today? What do I need to do to make this car safe? Or my favorite is the people that say, oh, don't worry about it. I'm just selling it. Fred, you've been selling it for 8 years now. Why don't we just go ahead and fix it? I recommend when somebody says they don't want to fix it because they're just selling it, to look right at them without smiling and say, oh, really? You're looking into selling it? It's actually a pretty decent little car. I'm looking at buying one. How much would you want for it? And I know that sounds like a joke, but it's not. I had a fellow I was training up in Alaska years ago, and I mentioned that in a class. And at the next class a month later, because we used to do 2 days of training, a month later for 2 days and a month later for 2 days, etc. And he came back, he said, you know, we did an inspection on this person's vehicle. It was a couple, and he called her and gave her the results of the inspection. And she thought, oh, that's a lot of money. And she said, well, you know, I don't know if we're going to keep it. That's a lot of money. So I'd rather maybe we'll just end up selling it. And he said, you know, ma'am, he said, that's a pretty decent little car. He said, I've test driven it myself. He said, if you're going to sell it, if you wouldn't mind letting me know, because my wife is looking at buying a vehicle and we might consider that. How much would you want for it? She said, well, like, we're not selling it like right now. And she said, I'm going to talk to my husband. And she called back and she said, you know what? You're right. It is a decent little car. And we've decided we're going to go ahead and fix it. In most cases, not all, but in most cases, it makes more sense to spend money repairing a vehicle than to go out and buy a newer vehicle. And we just looked at it. We saw that the depreciation on a vehicle is a lot of money. What do we say, 10 cents a kilometer, something like that. It was the highest. The highest depreciation on a vehicle is the depreciation of that vehicle. So in many cases, it makes sense to spend the money fixing up a car that we know something about than to go out and buy a new car. And again, one of the expenses we saw was the insurance, or the interest that's paid. And I know a lot of places today advertise free interest, but it's not free interest. Somebody's paying for it. It's built into the price of the car. So to go out and buy a brand new vehicle may be the most expensive approach. And I know somebody who just did that, who went out and bought a used vehicle for $5,000 instead of fixing up his old one. And I didn't say anything to him. It was a decent car that he bought, but it's, you know, $5,000 is not much, but he still had to finance it, and the depreciation is going to be higher as well. So point is, we can educate our customers and say, you know, I know that you may want to be selling the vehicle, but, you know, I recommend that whenever you're telling something wrong with somebody's vehicle, always tell them what's right as well. Sometimes we say, oh, your brakes are shot and this is done and this is done, and they're thinking, oh my God, it's a piece of junk. And they go, I may as well just get rid of it. It's not worth keeping. But if you say, you know what, it looks like the engine's in pretty decent shape, or the mileage is good on it, you've really looked after it, you know, tell them all the things that are right about the vehicle. And instead of just condemning it, just saying, you know, some good things that are in shape. Another quick story actually is when our van had, I think, 360,000 kilometers on it, the engine went, and the engine was going to be $4,700. And Errol, the fellow that I wrote the articles about, but also was the shop we took our vehicles to, he said, Kelly, I'm going to recommend that you just get rid of it and buy a different vehicle. Now, I don't exaggerate. We were in his top 10 customers at one point, not 10%, 10 customers. Somebody came to the door as a courier and dropped us off this beautiful gift. And he called me, I called him, said, thank you. He said, well, Kelly, you were in our top 10 customers. Now, we had replaced the transmission. Of course, it was a Chrysler, so it went through a few transmissions, 3 transmissions in the original, but not bad for 500,000 kilometers still. But we were in his top 10 customers. Now, we certainly weren't in his top 10% of gross profit customers because it was some bigger jobs. But he suggested that I sell the van and go out and buy a new Honda because he used to be a Honda dealership. Do you think I would be in his top 10 customers if I had a brand new Honda? I'd probably be in his bottom 10 customers, 10% at least, because I would be hardly repairing this vehicle. He wanted to have me sell it. He thought was the best advice. And I said, no, Errol, I know what we've done to this vehicle. We replaced the transmission last year. I said, we did replace the alternator. I said, I think that I want to get it fixed. And he said, I'm going to suggest that you don't. And I said, no, I'm going to buy an engine. Either I'm going to buy it from you or I'm going to buy it from somebody else. So he put the engine in, and I did that against his advice. And I can tell you when that vehicle hit 500,000 kilometers, because, and I don't exaggerate and make up stories, our family had that van for all those years. We had 78,000 kilometers when we bought it. And when it turned over 500,000 kilometers, we pulled to the side of the road. We sang happy anniversary to you. We had balloons in the car because we knew it was going to happen on the way back from school that day. And we celebrated. And I went to Errol's shop and I said, 500,000 kilometers today. And he said, Kelly, you know what? I think you made the right decision. And I'll tell you, when we did give away that vehicle shortly after that, because we were getting a different vehicle, my wife wanted a different one, so we got it, but I regretted it. And I can tell you that that vehicle was awesome. We took it on long trips. We took it on a 7-week trip one time across Canada back to the US, pulling a tent trailer, and that is one of the most comfortable vehicles I've ever driven in. And if you've ever driven like a PT Loser and you're driving down the street 20 kilometers and your butt's already sore, when you've got a vehicle that's that comfortable, it was a 1995 Plymouth Voyager. And when we got rid of it and got another vehicle, I thought, oh my God, I miss that van so much. Anyway, so the point is we can help educate our customers that spending money on an older vehicle may make sense. Now, if the floorboards are completely rusted out, then of course it doesn't make sense. But I don't think we should tell somebody whether they should buy a car if they're having it inspected to look at buying one, or if they're looking at getting it repaired to say you should sell it. We can give them the information. Here's the condition of the vehicle. Here's what's in good shape. Here's what you need, and they have to make a decision. But you can help educate them by showing them the depreciation of a new vehicle, the interest cost of a new vehicle, and the repairs of a used vehicle. And in almost every case, not every case, but in almost every case, it makes more sense to fix an older vehicle. And you can actually go to the AAA website and see what the actual current numbers are. There's a fellow that I don't recall his name, but he used to do the calculations and the research on defining whether you should fix up an old car or sell it. And I remember seeing years ago that it was 50%. So if your car was worth $3,000, it would make sense to put $1,500 into repairs. The last that I saw was dollar for dollar. So in other words, if you had a car that was worth $3,000, in many cases, he would recommend putting a full $3,000 into repairing it as compared to going out and buying a brand new vehicle on payments. So you've got all that interest and, of course, all the depreciation to go along with that. So back to this. We are wanting that customer to spend the $1,600 all at our shop. They're not going to come in 16 times and spend $100 each time they come in. That's like the $2 Charlie buying $10 worth of gas at a time. We can help educate the customer and help them make decisions based on their budget, but also based on what's practical and what's going to ultimately save them money in the long run. Our goal is that we sell 3 to 4 hours per repair order. And I'm just going to go with 3. 3 is a good number to start with. 3 hours per work order. I can tell you from my research and working with shops, the average shop is 1.2 hours per repair order. Our goal is 3. We're not talking about charging them more. We're not talking about increasing gross profit here. We're simply talking about having them spend the $1,600 in less visits. We would like to see them spend, in this case, of 4 visits a year, $400 per visit, which is a good number, which is going to be the $1,600. Or 3 times in a year is acceptable as well. The math to do here is simply take your labor rate and multiply it by 6. And that should be your shop's goal of what your average invoice would be in dollars. And by that, I mean everything: labor, parts, sublet, tires, towing, shop supplies, and environmental fees. So what we want to see is 3 times the labor rate. So let's make it simple math. Your labor rate is $100 an hour, just for illustration. You've got $300 in labor. And we looked at it in the last session. We should see an equal amount of parts, sublet, tires, towing, shop supplies, and environmental fees. So what we want to do is see half the money that comes in the door come from labor. When you look at your income statement for the month, the quarter, the year, it's not going to be every day. Don't look at it daily. That's overkill. That's really micromanagement. But at the end of the month, if your sales were, say, $50,000, approximately $25,000 of that should have come from labor, and the other $25,000 should come from parts, sublet, tires, towing, shop supplies, and environmental fees. And I make that clear because a lot of people still think, and it used to be that way years ago, they think that dollars should equal parts sales and none of the others that go along with it. And that was the case. When I first started training, we taught that your labor should be equal to your parts. But now, because we're doing more diagnosis than ever before, more types of inspections, we should see higher on labor than everything else individually, but combined together, 3 hours of labor, $300 in this case, should relate to $300 in parts, sublet, tires, towing, shop supplies, and environmental fees. So when I say parts and extras, extras does mean all the other things in addition to parts that we sell. So if we sell 3 hours worth of labor, we should sell about 3 hours worth of everything else that we sell. So take your labor rate times 6. So in this case, $600 would be what we want for our average. I did an on-site evaluation many years ago for a shop that was a tire shop. It was actually in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And it was a tire shop, and they worked on approximately 80 vehicles a day. I'm not exaggerating. Get it in, get it out, get it in, get it out, get it in, get it out. He was at 0.67 hours per work order, not even 1 hour per work order. The place was a complete, total zoo. Get it in, get it out, get it in, get it out. The stress was incredible. They weren't even spending a full hour. Now, yes, it was a tire store, but this is North Carolina, not a huge winter tire season happening there. So that wasn't part of it, but they were just so used to get it in, get it out. So we want to slow the machine down. And just to let you know, his name is James, and as far as I know, he's at about 1.6 hours per work order, which doesn't seem that much of a difference, but it's absolutely huge. We want to see people spend more money per visit. So back to this, if they're going to spend $1,600 a year, it would be nice to see the person 4 times a year. And it says here that this should not just be for oil changes. We don't just make an appointment for somebody for an oil change. I find that a lot of time when I mention pre-booking a customer's next appointment, the argument comes back, well, we don't know when they're going to need an oil change, or it's just an oil change, or the synthetic oil, so they're going further. Dealerships are recommending longer intervals between oil changes, and I'm sure we've all heard the stories of what can happen in that particular instance. It's not just about oil changes. But one thing about oil changes, and this occurred to me, I was doing some training just this past year in Toronto. Sorry, every once in a while it's got to get some moisture into my mouth. Engine idle time versus mileage. And I was thinking about that when I moved to Toronto for the first time, and I thought, oh my God, there's a lot of cars, millions and millions of cars. Toronto has about 7.9 million people in that entire area. It's a zoo. You get on those highways, and I'd be there thinking, how do people do this every day? And I got thinking, I'm sitting in traffic, and I'm looking at thinking, how many cars are sitting idling? Of course, the other thing that occurred to me is how many hours are spent in idle time in cars at drive-thrus at Tim Hortons in Canada or Starbucks, and how much gasoline is wasted every day just in drive-thrus. But when you're sitting in traffic, your engine is idling, but the mileage is not going, which is the next point. Vehicle engines are tracked in kilometers, how many kilometers on your vehicle, and most people determine if they need an oil change based on mileage. But if you think about it, Heavy-duty trucks, boats, planes, they're all tracked in hours of operation. An engine's on a plane is not on how many miles that plane has flown, it's how many hours, engines on, engines off. That's how the staff gets paid. Actually, when the engines are on running, they're getting paid. When they're not, so flight attendants are paid that way as well. So it's all based on engine hours. Well, how many hours is a car idling that the engine is not changing the kilometers? So I did some research, and my research showed, you can Google it, and this was something that Ford did actually. They determined that for every 1 hour of idle time, they believed the impact on the engine is equal to driving 25 miles. So I just translated it to 40 kilometers, approximately 40 kilometers. So according to Ford, for every hour that a car sits idling, it's equal to 25 miles, or in this case, 40 kilometers. Now, I don't know what it is across the country, but here I am in Vancouver, where I am here in Vancouver, I read that the average commuter spends 80 hours a year idling, 80 hours a year in traffic. Now, I've got a brother who is a salesman, and he drives ridiculous amounts. He needs an oil change literally every 5 weeks. So he's spending even more than that number of hours sitting idling. His mileage is higher, of course, but also his engine is idling a lot more. So when you do the math, depending on what area that you're in, if you live in the country, well, it's not going to be quite as much. But when it's stop and go operation, and I know we've always called it severe driving conditions stop and go, but severe driving conditions doesn't allow us to determine more of a science how often a person needs an oil change. So if a person is idling 80 hours in a year, and for some people even more than that, that is equal to almost one more oil change a year. So we need to be able to educate our customers. And by the way, we have some people on the line from GemCar software. And one thing I love about the GemCar software I learned not long ago is that you can actually track kilometers, miles, or hours, because they deal with a lot of heavy truck companies as well. And I thought, wouldn't it be neat when a customer comes in, let's say Andy Eaton, he's online here, he's one of my customers, and I come in and say, oh, since the last time you were here, you put X number of hours on your car. And a lot of the technology that's available in cars today, OBD2, you can actually pull up and see how many engine hours there are. And I know some trucks and some other types of vehicles that you can actually look at your own settings and see how many engine hours are on there. But I thought it would be a neat little extra to be able to tell customers when they come in and say, you have this many kilometers or miles on your car, but since the last time you were in, you had this many hours of engine idling. So you obviously sit and stop and go traffic. So we're going to recommend not having an oil change every 5,000 kilometers or 3,000 miles, but we're going to ask you to come in earlier to protect your engine. The idea isn't to try to save money on oil changes. The idea is to save your engine. I remember an ad that I saw in Calgary many, many years ago. It was a big billboard, and it said in big letters, it's cheaper to change your oil than to change your engine. And I thought, what a great way to educate us consumers. Some people think, oh, I can go there, it's $39, and that place is $49, and they're talking about spending less money on an oil change, and yet they're not thinking about their 12 or 15 or 40 or $50,000 vehicle. So back to this, we need to educate our customers that our oil change intervals are not solely based on mileage. We need to focus it on engine idle time, and you don't have to make it complicated. You can just say, based on our research, if you're an average consumer, if you're a salesperson driving every, how much, and you need an oil change every 5 weeks, well, that's different. But the average person is an extra oil change almost a year, so we're going to change oil change intervals to be 4 times a year instead of 3 times a year or twice a year. So we want to get our customers educated about coming back in for maintenance. And it's not just about oil changes. If a person goes longer between oil changes because they feel they don't need an oil change, they're not having other things in the vehicle inspected. They're not noticing tire wear. They're not noticing brakes that might soon be squeaking and then eventually grinding, and the next thing you know, they have to buy new rotors. We need to educate our customer that we don't want to just see you for your oil changes. We want to see you to maintain and to do a physical of the vehicle. We want to be able to monitor the vehicle to see if we can prevent bigger repairs or more expensive repairs for having being done. So just to reiterate this one page, engine idle time versus mileage. Again, engines idle that don't show up as mileage, and again, you can search it. The average, according to Ford, 1 hour of idle time is equal to 40 kilometers. And so if a person's commuting 80 hours a year, I don't know what it is in Toronto, but you can search it for your area to find out what the average person's commute time is. 80 hours in Vancouver here, that's 2 weeks, 2 work weeks of sitting in traffic. That would drive me nuts. And again, I'd like to encourage you, if you have the technology like GemCar, I don't know if there's other software that does that, but to be able to explain to the customer and explain to them, mileage versus hours on the vehicle. And I've already talked about the last point there, November versus February. November, you can take care of February in November by starting pre-booking those appointments. So even if a person is just in for their tires, those tires are still attached to a vehicle that's going to spend approximately $1,600 for the years that we work on. It's not just about the tires. We need to be less short-sighted than that. And again, the goal is 3 hours per repair order. Now, I know we covered this next thing last time. Not everybody was here last time, but I want to take a look at the big goal. But this time I want to relate to it as it relates to scheduling, not just the dollars that we want to see. And what I want to take a look at is the spreadsheet. And since the last time I was here, I did send you that spreadsheet. And we were taking a look at the average, above average, and awesome technician. So we've got I want to define this first, the available time, actual time, sold time, E-time. The available time of a technician a day is 8 hours, and scheduling greatly impacts that for a couple of reasons. One is how many cars to work on that day and the kind of work that we're going to do. How much time we spend. We could spend 8 hours doing a bunch of grunt work, or we could spend 8 hours doing gravy work, or a balance between the two. And we're going to cover it more in the selling class, but big picture here, repairs are normally bought and maintenance is normally sold. If I come to your shop, Kevin, and my brakes are grinding, they are metal to metal, you heard me driving in to your shop and I could actually feel the grind when I'm driving in. You don't have to sell me brakes. I am metal to metal. Unless I'm a complete total idiot, think I might get it cheaper someplace else. There are some people that are that dense. But you don't have to sell me brakes. I'm buying brakes. If I come to your shop, Susan, and my tires have metal coming out of them, you don't need to sell me tires. I'm buying tires because I need tires. But if I come to your shop and my vehicle seems to be running fine, but you note that I'm at 96,000 kilometers, and you say the manufacturer of your Toyota recommends that your timing belt is replaced at this time, and if, no pun intended, but we recommend that you replace the timing belt now, because if it does break, you've got an interference engine and it's going to cost you a huge amount more money. I didn't come in to buy timing belt. I wasn't even thinking timing belt. I wasn't thinking 96,000 kilometers. I came in for an oil change. I'm buying one. You're not selling me when I'm buying one, because that's what I came in for. And then you point out to me that I'm at 96,000 kilometers. So I'm buying something that I need, but you're selling me something that I need as that I need as well. And that's something to prevent, hopefully, from having to come back with much more damage on a vehicle the next time I come in. So back to this, your available time is how many hours a technician is there in any given day. And the actual time is how much time they actually spend working on income producing work. And I'm just going to pull that down, and I want to show you something that I did send to you if you were here last time. I am going to be sending it to you again, and this is a spreadsheet. I had some really neat comments on this particular spreadsheet, and this is looking at what we would call an average, an above average, and an awesome shop. And I'm just going to take available hours. What we're going to do is we're going to do it in a day at 8 hours. So we can just do this per day, whether you're an average shop, an above average shop, or an awesome shop. The technicians are there for 8 hours. Scheduling greatly impacts this by productivity. And productivity, by definition, is how much time of the day is spent on income producing work. If the technician spends 60% of the day on income producing work, and the efficiency, how fast they are, is 100%, they are going to produce the math's not calculating correctly there, they're going to produce about 100 hours in a day. Well, if they're producing 100 hours in a day, that would be 6 hours in a day. I'm so used to doing this by the month. Let's go back to the month because that's where my brain is. 168 hours in a day, we're going to sell about 100 hours in that month. The problem is, if in fact the productivity is not there because the car count is there, that can in turn end up being the problem that we're facing. So I'm going to go back to the workbook. If a technician doesn't have the work because we didn't schedule the work in, or we ran out of cars, or there wasn't enough cars there, that scheduling greatly impacts the actual time of the day and how much time they spend working on income producing work. Now that affects the next, which is the sold hours, how many hours we got paid for based on how many hours the technician was there, based on how many of those hours they spent working on cars. The sold time relates more to the kind of work that we sold. Is it grunt work or is it gravy work? For the most part, the work that the customer comes in for tends to be more grunt work. Something's already broken. Maintenance is taking care of things before they break. And I've had many shop owners say they don't really believe in maintenance. They want to fix what's broke, and they think that's the right thing to do. I've actually heard people say that maintenance is a ripoff, that factory recommended services aren't necessary. I saw a shop actually up in Alaska who would go through the factory recommended services from the dealership or from the manufacturer and say, I don't think you need to do this. You don't really need to bleed your brakes. I think that's a waste of money. You don't need to do this. And so they're doing a downsell, but they're also encouraging a person to not maintain something that could end up turning into something that is more expensive. That would be like saying to the person, I know that you have an interference engine, and I know that you have 120,000 kilometers on it, and I know that the manufacturer suggests that you replace it, but it's not broken, and I think that you can get another 10,000 kilometers. That's a foolish thing to do for somebody. If the manufacturer of the automobile recommends it, then I think that we should go ahead and do it. It's actually funny, it never occurred to me before, but after my accident, I had all sorts of things. I was hit by a cab walking across the street in Vegas and ended up in the hospital for 7 weeks in a wheelchair for 5 months. And some of the things that doctors were telling me, and I were telling other people, oh yeah, don't listen to that, don't listen to that. And I thought, you're not a doctor. Like, who are you? I have brain trauma from my accident, and I was reading some stuff, and I remember telling my dad what the doctor said. Oh, I don't buy that, I don't buy that. I said, well, that is not for sale, but why should I believe somebody who knows nothing about the brain over somebody who is the neurologist who did the scan, who knows exactly what's up? So sometimes we argue against the expert. I've had that happen in my career where I go into a shop that's not doing well, and I suggest that you do this, this, and this, and they say that won't work. Well, if you keep on doing what you're doing, it's not going to work either, so you need to make some changes. So back to the car, if the vehicle work needs to be done and it's recommended by the manufacturer as a maintenance item, then we should be doing that for the vehicle or for the customer. Not just because it's more profitable, and it is more profitable, but it's better for the customer as well. So the available time in a day is 8. The average technician is there 8 hours in a day. We want to make sure that we schedule the right amount of cars in so that they can spend the bulk of that 8 hours actually working on stuff that makes money. The sold time has a lot more to do, yes, with car count and how many cars. Too many can mess that up, but it's far more about the kind of work that we do. And I assure you that when you're pre-booking appointments, you're going to sell a lot more maintenance because you are, in fact, filling up your future with maintenance. A good example of this is the dentist. Dentists have gone a long way in educating us to better take care of our teeth. We go, they give us toothbrushes, they give us floss, they say you're not flossing, you should be flossing. Why would a dentist who makes money repairing teeth teach us to be better at looking after them if they get paid for doing it? Because the money is in the maintenance. When you go to your dentist's office, there's usually one licensed dentist and sometimes 2, 3, 4 hygienists, whatever the government, the local government allows them to have, the ratio of hygienists to dentists. The money's made in the maintenance. I was talking to my personal dentist one time, Dr. Ziegenhagel, and I was talking about pre-booking appointments for cars. And he said, oh, I love that. He said, too many times I want to get into a shop and they don't have any room for me and I can't get in for a while and I'm frustrated. I said, well, they should do like you do and making appointments. And he said, you know, that used to hurt us. He said initially we were encouraging people to do that. It was more of an emotional thing. We hate to see people in the pain that they're in. He said we almost sold ourselves or talked ourselves out of work. But he said now that we have so much maintenance going on, the money's in the maintenance. So if you went to call your doctor tomorrow morning because your tooth is sore, you're going to be able to get in. Most likely your dentist will squeeze you in. You will go in and see the dentist. You'll probably pay a premium and you'll get it taken care of. But if tomorrow morning you call and say, can I get some cleaning done today, they probably won't be able to do that for you. Why? The cleaning time is booked in advance. The repair time is not. You don't pre-book a root canal. You don't pre-book the pulling of a teeth, the extraction of a tooth. You go to the dentist, they can say you need to come back in 6 months or a year for hygiene work, but they're not going to say we phone the psychic hotlines and you need to come in because you're going to start to get tooth whatever and you need to get that tooth pulled, or they're not going to sell you repair. It's the same thing with us. We're not pre-booking repair. We are pre-booking the maintenance. So, and I want to get into the E-time. E-time is the amount of time that is spent a non-productive work, or what we call expense time. So we looked at this again last time for everybody who was here, but I just want to reiterate, productivity is how much time of the day spent working on income producing work. Scheduling has a huge impact on that. Efficiency, how fast the technician gets the work done, is definitely part of how many cars in a day. And again, the goal is 3 hours per work order. So in a 3-bay shop, we want to see 3 hours per 3 hours per vehicle. So that is 3 vehicles per technician per day. I had a fellow said, how about 3 vehicles per technician per bay? And I said, no. 3 hours per technician per day, an average of 3 hours. Now, I had a fellow, by the way, who misunderstood, and he went back to his staff and said, look, we want to sell 3 hours a work order. We're only booking 3 cars a day for you. Now that's stressful. I wouldn't recommend that, but that's what he thought we meant, which is not what we meant. And it actually worked for him. So they found the work that needed to be done. And incidentally, the challenge here is for every dollar that a customer spends, $7 in needed repairs leaves. When you're there with the vehicle and you're working on that vehicle and the customer picks it up and it drives away, statistically for every dollar that we did, $7 drove away. And one of the things we do in our management groups, where we have a group of people come together every month or every 2 months in a management group, and we do what we call on-site evaluations. One of the things we'll do is say, okay, here's a car out there. It's ready to go. The customer's ready to pick it up. We ask for the owner's permission for 3 people on our team, usually an advisor, an owner, and a technician. They take that vehicle that's done, ready to go, ready to be picked up. They take it for a test drive, they come back and they do a quick inspection, just a visual inspection of the vehicle, and find out what that car sitting there ready to be picked up, what was done, and what work still needs to be done that we didn't estimate, that we didn't take the time to inspect. Comes back to the vehicle. Sometimes the technician goes, forget it. It's an old vehicle. There's no way they're going to fix this. There's no way I'm going to give them an estimate. We have no idea who's going to spend what on a vehicle. Some people will spend money that we didn't think they would. Sometimes we think they don't have the money. You look and say, well, it's going to cost $1,800 to fix it. Okay, when can you get started? And you think, oh, okay. Well, they can say, well, I don't have a car payment. Maybe it's an older vehicle. I used to have an older vehicle and had a bumper sticker on it that said, don't laugh, it's paid for. When somebody has a $700 a month car payment, maybe they don't have the money to spend in repairing the vehicle because it's on top of their $700 payment. But a person with an older vehicle that's paid for says, yeah, I've got the money to fix it because I'm not making payments and the depreciation and interest that we just took a look at. And proficiency is simply the percentage of the money that was spent. Now, what I did is I took an email, and you could see, I don't try to cover this up. This was October 27th, 2006. And that's Ronald Tremblay. I've known Ronald since well before 2006. He's taken a huge amount of training. And what I did is I took this email and I broke it down to make it simpler for training purposes. And this was an email. The reason he sent it to me, it was I used to almost always every year speak at the Las Vegas Cars event, which was the same week as the SEMA show and the APEX show, and sometimes the NACE show for the collision industry as well. It was Automotive Week, busiest week in Vegas, and that happened to be the week that I did get hit by the taxi down there. But anyway, I asked him to send me an email because I was teaching a workshop on pre-booking appointments, and so he sent me this email that I could read at that particular event. And the reason I wanted to keep it there is because I want to show you that this is not a new idea. We've got Susan and Andy on the call today. You've been pre-booking appointments for several years now. I remember back in probably 2007, 2008, somewhere in there, we were looking at the pre-booking of appointments. I just want to quickly look at this email. He said, about 1 year ago, Kelly Bennett informed me that I'd become one of many shops owners as he bestowed of the king of booking the next appointment. I used to call him the king. At that time, I was oblivious to how big of a deal this was, but honored to get the title just the same. This week, he asked me to tell the story, and he says Las Vegas. I call it lost wages. I haven't lost any wages there, but lots of people have. Today, the day he wrote it, October 27, 2006, and just for the record, I am right now within 15 kilometers of where his shop is. I've been to his shop. At that time, this is October 27th, he had 815 appointments already pre-booked through the end of March. So we're talking about October, let's say just November, because it's at the end of the month. So in November, he already had 815 pre-booked appointments, and understand that's for November, December, January, February, March to the end of March. So he counted 815. He knows that he sells an average of 3 hours per work order, which is an average at the time based on his labor rate of $500 each. So he did the math, 815 appointments already booked times $500 each is already sold, pre-sold, $407,000. This is the way the dentists look at it as well. How much have we already sold? They haven't got paid for it yet, but it's pre-booked appointments, and of course they call us in advance to remind us of those appointments. The shortfall of appointments had a value of $342,000. So what he's saying is he didn't sell all of the work. He wanted to allow for drop-in customers. And that's the question. How much work do you pre-book in advance? You don't fill up your day. If you pre-booked everything, you would not be able to take in work for your customers who need something done that day. It would not be possible. By the way, Errol, the shop that I would go to, I don't live there anymore, so I don't go, but he was a great shop. We dealt with him for years. But if you phoned his shop, you would almost never, and I don't like to use the word never, but almost never be able to get in for a 2-week period because he was that booked out. Now, Errol would say, hey, Kelly, I am 2 weeks booked ahead. And I'd say, no, Errol, you are 2 weeks behind, and you haven't figured that out yet. If you have appointments like crazy for the next week and nothing after that, or appointments like crazy for the next 2 weeks and nothing after that, that's not pre-booking. That means that you can't get the work done and you've made an appointment in the next available slot. So 2 weeks out is not pre-booking. Some people think that's what we're talking about. No, we're looking at what he's talking about here, and that is 815 appointments already booked for March. And again, back to the fellow that I mentioned earlier, Voigt, he had 44 pre-booked appointments. So he was just starting at that time for the month of February. Here's a guy that's been doing it longer, 815. So then he said, I estimated the $500 or 500 drop-in customers to be a potential revenue of $250,000. So what he's doing is looking at the future of his business until the March of 2007 at this point, should be an average of $500 per repair order. Now, I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration because drop-in business is usually less hours per work order than one that's booked in advance, but his target was $999,000. So that, the appointments that we just took a look at, we also have 106 appointments in the next 5-month window. His best month that he ever had to date was best 5-month period. I love his comment here. I love this information because we were completely at the mercy. Sorry, I saw a message. We were completely at the mercy of our customers breaking down that we wanted to fill the base. The shortfall was he didn't sell the entire amount of work. He pre-booked 5 months worth of work, but he still had those number of hours remaining, which translates to that dollars. So he had $407,000 pre-booked of potential of almost $1 million. So he only sold a little less, well, 40% approximately of his goal. So the shortfall was money that had not been pre-booked. And again, the idea isn't to pre-book 100%. If you sold every single day in advance for the next 5 months, you'd have some customers that were pretty ticked with you. Our goal is that we have reserve time in our day, and we're going to cover that in a short little bit here. I love his comment here. We were completely at the mercy of our customers breaking down. We fought to fill the base. So they would hope that customers would come that day. And I've been training a long time, and I've been in classes where people would come to the class at 9 o'clock, and some of them would say, oh, I'm really stressed out. There's only one car scheduled for today. There was one left over from yesterday. That's okay, but I'm hoping that, you know, people come in today. And I had another fellow in that particular class that I'm talking about who said, no, I don't do it that way anymore. He said, I don't fill up by the day. He said, I've got things pre-booked in advance. He said, I can't deal with the stress. Could you imagine if dentists opened up tomorrow morning with not one single scheduled appointment and they were hoping that people would drop in? It would be a really crazy way to run a business. I love what he said. We also had no idea of what work would look like ever. They wouldn't be able to look forward. And the same thing as I mentioned with Jim Voigt, he hated February's. They had hated February's for 3 generations because they had no idea what February would look like. One other thing about Jim is he said to me, Kelly, I see that you always take off spring break, which I did. I would find out at September when the kids would get the schedule for school. I would block off spring break. It would annoy me that they had the time off and I didn't, and yet I was self-employed. So I would block off that time. So somebody contacted me to do training. I was blocked off that week. He wanted to do the same thing. So what I suggested to him is to pre-book appointments in advance so that he knew when he was going away during spring break in March that he had more than enough work to get him by. And not sold out. He had 20% reserve time. And he told me, he said, Kelly, he said, the schedule looks awesome. He said, my only concern is what happens if too many people come in a breakdown situation and mess up our schedule. That was his concern. And he went on that vacation, his spring break with his 2 daughters and his wife. I know them well, and they actually went to Newfoundland, and now he takes off every spring break. Well, maybe not so much anymore because his girls are now out of school. I love his comment here. Now we have knowledge about our future, and our battle for the goal to fill up the future is now, it's basically now over. It's not a fight. He's looking at filling them up in advance by focusing on the next picture. Then he says our goal, so he's not quite at his goal yet, is 1,500 vehicles for the next 5 months. Continuing on, I don't want to get into all the detail. I'm going to be sending this email to you. He says, and I love the way he says this, to accomplish this, I seriously learned, he meant learnt, and implemented strategic systems. So it wasn't just learning things, but actually putting them into place. And he was retraining himself, I'm saying that, for professional role as an advisor technician. So he realized that if this was going to happen, he needed training for himself, his advisors, and educate his technicians. For our customers to keep the appointments, he or she must, number one, have a trusting professional advisor. They need to trust you so they believe what you have to say, that you care about the choices the customer makes. 2, see the information from various inspection reports, which is a huge part of what we're talking about next week, that are filled in by the technicians, that make sense to the customer, that we can make things clear to the customer. And one of the things I love about like the GemCar software, I know some other systems do it too, but GemCar, where you take pictures of what you're seeing and you can text those to the customer, email to the customer, print them off and saying, okay, we took this photo, this really should be done, and what we've gone ahead and done is made the appointment for you to have that done 2 weeks from now or whatever. Fully comprehend the consequences of the decision relating to the vehicle's health and reliability. So if they make a decision that could cost them more money, we need to educate them. To give my professionals time, there's 3 things that had to be done, he said, and all of us, sorry, I want to slow down here. To give my professionals time to get these 3 things done, I had to get us all used to becoming proficient with these things. Upfront selling, so making sure we sell it in advance. Perform work order write-up procedures, which we're covering in the next webinar next Wednesday. We're going to also give you inspection forms, how to properly sell diagnostic labor. As I mentioned, that's going to be a future webinar. I do have it recorded if you want the information prior to that. We'll get to that subject in live webinars in January. A custom maintenance program, so you go through with the customer and explain what the vehicle needs to have done and why, and the other things, work order, rack flow, time cards, we're going to talk about next time. Then he says booking the next appointment is the final step and sticks when the groundwork is all done. So it's not the only thing, it's many things. Anyway, I'm not going to go through the rest of this, but he goes through in the email and he explains how much of an impact it made in his business. So I'm going to send you that. You can read that on your own, but I wanted to show you this is not just an idea. These are things that we're talking about that are being done by people all across the country. I know many people who are pre-booking appointments just like dentists do. I pulled this next quote from a workshop I wrote called From Service Writer to Service Consultant, and just to let you know, that is part of the 5-day class that I'm bite-sizing into these webinars, so all of the information from that full-day class are in there. But I wanted to take out this quote specifically for today's class. The primary job of a service advisor for the customer is to be a consultant, not just an advisor, not just a sales rep, not just a sales writer or a service writer. Basically, a service writer is a person who just writes service, but a consultant is somebody who educates the customer. Each day, the majority of the position is the E and A, and I know Susan's online and she sent me an email and said, hey, that's our slogan. We need to educate and advise the customer. How many times does a customer come into your shop, they want something they don't need, or they need something they don't want? No, we can't flip it, Susan. She's sending me this email. You know why? Because the name of the shop is A and E, Andy. What's the E for? I don't even know. But she reversed it, but it's Eaton. So Eaton and Andy. Anyway, so A&E is the name of the shop, so it's pretty close to E&A, so they flipped that around. But we don't advise and educate, we educate and advise, just for the record, Susan. And by the way, we taught this before I met A&E, okay? Some advisors perceive the position to be more of a writer, and they're simply an order taker. I wrote a workshop years ago called Beyond Order Taking, how we need to take this whole process beyond order taking. Sometimes, as I mentioned, the customer comes in, they want something they don't need, or they need something they don't want. And so it's our responsibility to educate the customer. Maybe they just want us to replace the alternator, which we could do, but it could end up being a complete waste of their money. Some of the examples, we've already talked about this. Oil change only customers, if they come in just for an oil change, that oil change is still being done on a vehicle that they're going to spend about $1,600 on this year. So our job with that is an LOF. And for those of you that have been in our training, LOF stands for Labor Opportunity of the Future. And that means that every single time you're doing an oil change, there's no point of doing that. Susan already sent the answer. Labor opportunity of the future. That's good, Susan. Oil change customers, if they're there just for an oil change, again, that's still a customer that is going to spend approximately $1,600 on that vehicle. We need to properly inspect the vehicle to find the work that needs to be done. And in those types of vehicles, they're more like a $2 Charlie, $2 Charlie buying $2 worth of gas at a time. They usually have even more pent-up repairs. And that's a classic case of $1 in and $7 out. So it's our responsibility to provide that information to the customer and pre-book that next appointment. Tire switch customers we've already talked about. And I just want to reiterate reserve time. We have 8 hours in a day. If we've got 3 technicians, we've got 24 hours to sell in a day. Well, the goal would be what? If you've got 24 hours available for you tomorrow, how many hours should you want pre-sold before the day even starts? Now, we got some vehicles sitting in the bays that we're going to continue working on in the morning, but we certainly don't want to sell all 24 hours in advance, because that means the instant a customer comes in and says, oh, by the way, while it's here, or my favorite line they use is, by the way, while you're already in there, would you mind? In other words, I didn't make an appointment for this, but could you do this for me today too, please? Well, you do this every single day. Most of you are on the counter every single day. What percentage of your customers come in and they want more work than they had an appointment for? Well, that happens all the time. And if we don't have some reserve time in the schedule, well, we're going to mess things up. So our recommendation is that you have 20% reserve time built into the schedule. So that means in an 8-hour day, you are not pre-booking all of it. You're only selling 80% of that time, approximately 5 to 6 hours. And so that is already out or sold. So that means when a customer comes in and wants more work done, we can say, hey, we've got some reserve time built in for that. Or when you inspect a vehicle and it needs more work, and you're doing diagnosis and it turns into a repair, sometimes a little repair, sometimes huge repair. It's not a perfect science, but your shop is unique and different. Most shops need about 20%. I can tell you from my experience that shops on Mondays usually need more. My experience is that 50% reserve time for a Monday is usually really good because Monday has the most drop-in customers of the week, and Friday tends to be the grass cutter day where we have more cars that we want to get back to the customer for the weekend. So you can track it with your shop. Build 50% in for Mondays and Fridays and 20% for the rest of the week and see how things go. And if that works, great. If you find you're running out of day before the end of the cars, which happens a lot, then you need more reserve time. If you're running out of cars before the end of the day, then you need less reserve time. So you need to focus on what's happening at your shop and focus on the days of the week. And by the way, the great thing about pre-booking appointments is we recommend that you don't even suggest Mondays. Don't suggest Mondays. So your appointment could be the week of whichever, December, would you like Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday? Now, if they need a Monday, we can give them a Monday, but why would we fill up our Monday when it's usually a day that kind of sort of takes care of itself? Pre-booking appointments, what I call the roadmap to sanity, and I can tell you we're going to go a little bit over here on this. What do we say? Too often we say to the customer, we'll see you next time. We say, see you next time. What does that really mean? What that really means is the next time your car breaks down, hopefully you're close to us and you can come back in. They don't know when that's going to be. You don't know when that's going to be. So to say to the customer, see you next time, we don't know when that's going to be. Well, we should know when that's going to be, and we should go ahead and make that appointment for them. Pre-booking appointments, what kind of businesses pre-book appointments today? We already talked about dentists. They do. Lawn companies know they're coming next week. Fertilizing companies know they're coming 3 or 4 times in a year. I've talked to people who have swimming pools and the pool company comes in to open up and close down the pool. Hairdressers will do this where you want to get the same person. You don't want somebody else cutting your hair. You want to get the person you trust where you can book that appointment knowing that hair grows and you're going to need a haircut in 6 weeks or 8 weeks and go ahead and make that appointment in advance. Heck, even funeral homes today pre-book appointments. They can't exactly give you a date, but you can pre-arrange everything. And by the way, if you talk to people in the funeral business, pre-booked and pre-arranged funerals are the most profitable ones they do. Inviting them back. And we're just going to go through this fairly quickly. What are the benefits of pre-booking appointments for the customer? Why did I like being a customer to shop their pre-booked appointments? Well, number one is I can get in when it's convenient for me, not just the convenience for the shop. One time I called Errol and I couldn't get in and it was frustrating, and I finally got in for the oil change. Now I was really over on the oil change because I come back and I notice, oh, I'm on a trip. We need an oil change. I call Errol. He's too busy. I can't get in for a couple weeks. I get in and now I'm way over in the oil change. And he said that to me. He said, Kelly, I noticed that you always go over on your oil changes. And I said, true. You're right. It's correct. I said, but it's not just our fault. I said, I'll come back and realize we're due for an oil change or overdue, and I can't get in to see you for 2 weeks, and we drive a ton. And you know what he said to me? I said to him, Errol, I would like if we can make an appointment. And you know what he said to me? He said, look, sorry, what I actually said is I said, Errol, Carrie, my wife, works 2 days a week and is off 3. And she said, wouldn't it be nice to get the car repaired when I'm in town and when she's off? I know usually 2 months in advance when I'm going to be on the road training, and she knew which days of the week. So I said, we'd like to get appointments for when I'm off the road and she is off. And he said, look at Kelly, he said, you've only got 2 vehicles to look after. We've got hundreds. That's exactly what he said. You've only got 2 vehicles to look after. We've got hundreds. While that was a true statement, we only have 2, he's got hundreds, it was extremely rude. And I said, Errol, actually, to be clear with the story and make it accurate, I was pissed off, and I'll use that word, I was pissed, but I didn't have an answer right away. So I paid my bill, and I'm driving home, and I was so mad at him. And I phoned him when I got home, and he said, hey, Errol's Automotive. I said, yeah, Errol, it's Kelly. I said, could you do me a favor? Can you look up and see when we got an alternator on the car? And I can hear him typing on his computer, and he told me when that was. I said, when did we get tires for the van? And he goes to a computer, and he tells me that. And I said, how often do we get oil changes? And he said, just a second. I hear him typing. He said, you need an oil change every 7. Oh, my God, no, Kelly. He said, you need an oil change every 5 weeks. And I said, isn't that amazing? I said, by the way, he said, no, stop. I said, why? He said, I know what you're doing to me. So what am I doing to you, Errol? He said, you're telling me that even though you only look after 2 vehicles and I look after hundreds, that I know more about your vehicle than you do. I said, exactly. You track this stuff. I'm a busy person. We're a busy world. The whole world is busy. We got 3 kids, 8 sporting events a week. We're not thinking much about our cars. But when an expert at a repair shop knows that we need an oil change every 5 weeks, we don't know that. We just know we need lots. I said, Errol, why don't we make an appointment for 5 weeks from now on a Tuesday when Carrie's off and I will be in town. And I was so impressed that he sent me an email that said he wanted to confirm the appointment that I had, which I kept that appointment. It worked well, but I can tell you he never did it again. So he did it and it worked, and yet he's still a shop that you can't get in for 2 weeks, and again, 2 weeks behind, not 2 weeks ahead. Other benefits for the customer is you can give them a sense of what things are going to cost so they can budget from that. You can tell me that I'm going to need a timing belt. The manufacturer recommends it, how much the timing belt is. You can go through what you're going to do when you're doing the timing belt. You can talk about the other services that are overlapping, and you can give me an estimate. So I know that in 4 months from now, I'm going to have my timing belt replaced and all the stuff that you suggested, which is going to cost me this much money. So I know months out or 2 months out or whatever point in time in advance what needs to be done. If you know how much I drive and you can tell me, by the way, you're going to be at 96,000 kilometers in approximately 6 weeks, and this is the manufacturer's recommended service at 96,000 kilometers, here's how much it's going to cost. Not only do I know I have an appointment 6 weeks out, but I know what the appointment approximately is going to cost, and you may find other things as a result of the inspection, but at least I have an idea. The other benefits, I think, is the customer feels important. When Errol said to me, look, you've only got 2 vehicles to look after, we've got hundreds, I certainly did not feel very important. And when we're talking next time about selling and such, we're going to take a look at the 4 currencies in our customers' lives, and feeling special is one of those 4 things that's important to people. And I did not feel very special. He's basically saying, you're not really that important to me to pre-book these appointments for you. Other benefits for the customer, they're going to save money. Yes, I can save the money for the appointment, but having more maintenance done is going to save me money in the long term. You remember the commercial from years ago? You can actually YouTube it. It's on YouTube. You can pay me now or pay me later. And it's from Fram Filters, where the fellow says a filter costs about $6. And then the guy behind him who rebuilds small engines says, I cost about $600. And you can pay me now or pay more later. And it's a really good series. I think we should bring that commercial back to educate our customers that a timing belt now is going to cost you this much. A timing belt when it breaks is going to cost you a lot more. The benefits to the advisor, pretty straightforward. It's scheduled work. So we can look at the schedule and have a good sense of what's coming in. It also, number 2, helps to balance the week out. So instead of just doing crazy things on Monday, usually we're spinning our heads on Monday, we can balance out Mondays and make Monday a bit more of a sane day. And so when we're pre-booking appointments, almost always book Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So you could start to pre-book your Tuesday and your Thursday. It's like what movie theaters do during the week to get us in to do business with them because it's slower. You see a lot of things that companies do to fill up the slower days of the week. Airlines do it Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. You'll see much better pricing usually. They discount. We don't have to discount. We can just schedule it differently. Other benefits to the advisor, it's a lot more profitable. It's usually higher gross profit items. And we believe a service advisor should be paid based on salary and a percentage of gross profit. And so it could help make them more money. And another benefit is the customer friendlier because a person who is there practicing maintenance is going to be a lot happier than somebody who came in because their car got towed in because something major went wrong. By the way, you can also add to that list for the advisor, and it's applicable here for the technicians, is pre-ordered parts. And I was literally in the parts store that Jim Voigt, who's in Ontario, deals with, and the fellow who owns the parts store says, I love Jim. He said, I wish I could clone Jim. I wish I could have lots of Jim, because he's already called the customer. What they do is they call the customer 5 days out to confirm their appointment for next week. You don't phone and say your appointment's tomorrow. Dentists used to remind us the day before. Now they usually remind us a week before. Why? Because life has changed. They would phone and the person would say, yeah, okay, I'll be there tomorrow. He said, now we phone and they go, tomorrow, don't tell me it's tomorrow. There's no way it could be tomorrow. I got way too much going on tomorrow. So now they call the week before. And that's what Jim does. He calls the week before the appointment. The customer confirms, yes, I'm coming in. And we'll talk about how many keep those appointments, percentage. Excuse me. And then he knows he needs that timing belt. So he calls and orders it. When does he need it? Next Tuesday. So parts stores usually like, when do you need it? This afternoon. Well, more and more parts ordered in advance is helpful for the service advisor and also helpful for the technicians as well. Another benefit for the technicians is it's easier work. Maintenance is typically a lot easier, more of a breeze, more gravy work than some of the grunt work. And how many times we heard technicians complain about having too much grunt work. The benefits to the owner and manager are all the above, the ditto from above, but we can add much more profitable. It's a lot more money. It's a higher gross profit. If you read the end of the email from Ron, the sales volume didn't change near as much as the gross profit changed, and he wasn't spending all that time at his business. He went from being a workaholic to working a fraction of the time. He lives on a boat, which is another quite an interesting story. He's a neat guy. He's a work hard, play hard guy. He used to work, and now he's got a life and a business. Other benefits is cash flow. It's much better cash flow, like you just saw with Ron, him calculating out all of the sales over the next 5 months. And again, dentists can do the same thing. They can see how much is already pre-sold for the year in the whole area of maintenance, because maintenance can be booked in advance, repairs can't per se. Other benefits to the owner, it's going to be much better cash flow from month to month to month, so that you're not wondering, oh, I can buy something, oh, now I can't because I don't have the money anymore. And I think every single one of us knows the stress of cash flow, where you're focusing on sales today, because I got to pay my bills, tomorrow's payday, got to have the money for payday. But when you're not thinking just about cash flow, you can be a lot more creative about other things. A survey of some extremely successful shops. I've already mentioned Jim Voigt. Jim Voigt, at any given time, will have over 400 pre-booked appointments. Now, that's what I used to teach, because that's what he did. But I was in a session just recently. It was on a Sunday. It was for a company called Master Mechanic in Toronto, Ontario. They have like 40 different, I think something like 40 stores in their franchise. And I mentioned Jim, and I mentioned that his daughter was now working there, and that it was now 4th generation, and that at any given time he had 432 pre-booked appointments. I was using the exact number. When the session was over, this young lady walks up to me and she said, "Hi, Kelly." She said, "I don't think we've ever met, but I'm Jim Voigt's daughter." And I said, "I know you." I said, "I've met you. I've stayed in your parents' home." She said, "Well, I was really young then." I said, "No, you were driving a car then because your dad was giving you the car keys." And I said, "But I know you well, your family." And she said, "I want to tell you that I went to work for my dad's company." And she said, part of the problem was he was good at pre-booking the appointments, and he was good at following up with the appointments, but he wasn't really good at putting it all into the schedule. So he wasn't really good at balancing out and seeing how much reserve time, etc. So she put a system in place to be able to track it in advance, similar to what we just saw from Ron Tremblay at the company called The Garage that I read the email from. And I'm not exaggerating this. You could phone her and ask her. Her name's Lori's his wife. Can't remember his daughter's name. Anyway, she said, "Kelly, we have over 1,000 appointments now. Over 1,000. And she said, "Kelly, we don't just pre-book one, we pre-book the year." She said, "We do spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter." Yes, she was young, but driving a car. She wasn't as young as she said she was. And you know how kids are. You don't remember your parents' friends coming over. Anyway, excuse me, over 1,000 pre-booked appointments, but that included spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter. So when a person comes in right now and has their winter tires taken or put on, that appointment was already booked when they had the winter tires taken off. So now when a customer leaves the shop with their winter tires, they already have an appointment to come back. I don't know exactly what month they start to pre-book, probably March, but they pre-book the appointment depending on the law. Sometimes you have to have the winter tires on for such and such a period of time. And so those appointments are pre-booked in advance for that as well. So she said, quote, "We have over 1,000 pre-booked appointments. So most of our customers, we know when they're coming in the spring, when they're coming in the summer, the fall, the winter, and we always remind them of those appointments upcoming. Chad is a fellow in the United States. He's actually in York, Pennsylvania, and we talked about pre-booking appointments. He'd never tried it. I saw him at the next class a month later, and he said, Kelly, I already have 52 pre-booked appointments booked. And I said, well, how many people have said no? He said, nobody yet. Lisa is a person, I was in a shop, she's somewhere in California, and I was at her shop, and I was looking, we were doing it on site, and it was September, and she already had an average of 7 appointments a day for all of October, all of November, and all of December. So I'm giving you different examples of people that are really doing this. It's not just an idea, it's something people are doing. The last step process, and then we're done. Number 1, we recommend that you plant the seed when the customer drops off the vehicle in the morning. So you're just starting this process. It's new to you. It's new to them. It's new to you. So when they drop off the vehicle in the morning, you do exactly what you're doing right now. You say, drop off the car. Here's what it's going to cost. Can I get your signature here? Can I get the keys? Do you need a ride to work? And by the way, we'll be making your next appointment. Just mention it to them so it's not a surprise when you mention it later on. If they question it, you could explain it, but most times they just say, oh, okay. Number 2 is you plant the seed again when you call them. So I call Susan and I say, Susan, your car's ready to go, or Susan, your brake inspection's done. You need this brake job. Here's what we need to do. Here's what needs to be done. Here's how much it's going to cost. We could do it for you today. And you go ahead with that. Say, okay, the vehicle will be ready at 5 o'clock. And by the way, we'll talk about the next appointment we've booked. Number 3, and I can tell you, and there's some people on this call, I'm sure, that have been booking appointments and it's not been done consistently. And I can tell you the biggest problem, without a doubt, is we ask them if they want to make an appointment. You never ask, you tell. You don't say to the customer, well, how would you like to make an appointment to come back on March the 8th? Well, they can say yes or they could say no. Now, if you ask them, they can obviously say, well, I don't know where I'm going to be on March 8th. And I recommend you look right at them and say, I know exactly where you're going to be on March 8th. You're going to be standing right there. Give me some of your money. Okay, that's a joke, okay? You don't say that to the customer, but they don't know where they're going to be. A friend of mine who's a repair shop owner as well in California, he said, Kelly, you know what I want to do? Susan just sent me a message. Sometimes we do. I'm sure you do. There's certain customers that you can get away with almost anything, and humor is something people like. And fact is, Susan, if I was a customer and you said to me, I know exactly you're going to be standing right here, give me some of your money, I would laugh and I would respect the fact that you know me well enough that you know that you can get away with that kind of humor, which is actually quite funny. But some customers might be offended, so you have to know the customer, which is the point that Susan just made. Anyway, he said, Kelly, what I'm going to do when I go to the dentist next time, I'm going to listen to the wording, because wording is key here. The words that you choose to use are important. And he said, I went to the dentist and I couldn't wait. I gave the money and then I thought, okay, what's you going to say? What does she say? And she said, okay, let's go ahead and make your next appointment for. She didn't say, would you? She said, let's go ahead, and went right to the calendar. So I recommend that you do the exact same thing. Let's go ahead and make your appointment, or we've already gone ahead and made the appointment. I can tell you, reminding them is something you need to do. Now, when, not Jim Voigt, but Ron Tremblay first started, he tracked it, and he said 67% of the people kept their appointments. So some people didn't. So should you stop doing it because only 60% of the people come, or 50%, or whatever your number is? You keep doing it. I'd rather have 60% of the people keeping the appointments than nobody have any appointments and not keeping them. And I don't exaggerate. He would tell you that currently they track it at the end of the month, somewhere between 90 and 100% of the people keep their appointments. In our management groups, I actually have a composite. And one of the things we track with each member of the group is how many appointments they booked that month. So this month I booked 28. This month I booked 56. This month I booked 78. And then there's another line in the composite that says what percentage of those people came in. So they can say that 80% of those people came in, or how many people. We use a percentage and a number. We want to find out how many people come back in. Now, this was written by another client. His name is Rex Sars, and he's in Toronto. Rex has been taking training from me. I remember 20 years ago, this very November, I was training there, and he came to a class, and 20 years later, fact is now I'm now training his son, Todd, who's a brilliant service advisor. And he found that it wasn't working great because of the follow-up, because they'd phone and say, do you want to make that appointment tomorrow? Again, asking. So here's the verbiage that he used. We are calling to confirm. Don't use the word remind because you might have some people say, of course I didn't forget. You think I've got Alzheimer's? We're calling to confirm your appointment at Next Appointment Auto for Thursday, June 2 at 8:15. We recommend that you always talk about the day of the week, not just the date of the month. Too often we say the 15th or the 18th. Most people will say, what day of the week is that? The date and the day are not the same thing. Oftentimes somebody says a day and you go, well, what date is that? What is it, the 15th or the 18th? What day? So always tell them the day of the week, because in my case with my wife, like many other people, we knew that 2 days of the week were great for appointments and the other 3 were not, or vice versa. So a lot of people plan their lives by the day of the week, not the date of the month. So we've made your appointment for Thursday, and again, here's your opportunity to avoid Mondays and Fridays. June 2 at 8:15. We don't want to have everybody showing up at 8 o'clock in the morning. What he did to add a bit of a sense of urgency is, if you're unable to make this appointment, please call ahead of time so we can use the time for someone else. I had a doctor's appointment that I had booked for today. I came to Vancouver for it, and I called today. I said, you know, it'd be really good if I could change it to Friday. I'm apologizing I made it today. I said, can you fill up the time? She said, absolutely. We have lots of walk-ins today. I said, great. So I had no problem. But if they would have said, no, we won't be able to fill it up, I would have made that appointment today. But she said Friday. In fact, she sounded relieved, actually. She said, oh, Friday's great. And then on Friday, she would probably be relieved too, because the day comes and you realize that you said things that you shouldn't have said. How many times have you said yes and you shouldn't have? Please call ahead of time so we can use the time for someone else. We realize that you have a choice in repair shops, and we appreciate you selecting Next Appointment Auto as your preferred auto expert. Now, you could send this by text, you could send it by email, you can make the call, you could send it by mail as well, whatever your system is. But I want to say this one thing that I learned from Rex just recently, is they don't do it this way anymore. And I know I just told you how to do it, but here's something they added to it, and here's the difference. Instead of saying that your appointment is for this day, they say the week of. And I've been to a shop, he's got a training center upstairs that I've used, I've trained the staff there, I've trained other people there, and I've been at the counter, and here's what they do. They have their work order, which is turned into an invoice. The customer comes in, they go through what they did, what the amount is, that it was going to be as much or less than what they quoted. It never, ever goes over. They never spend money without the person's authorization. If it needs to change, they don't do the work first. Of course, how many people besides me have sold the work, upsold the work after the fact? You think, oh, okay, we had to do that much extra work. Let's see if I can sell it. This needs to be done. And hopefully they say yes, because it's already done. So we want to sell it in advance, right? You don't want to spend the money without their authorization. So they go through that, and on every invoice, there's a card. It's a business card size, and it says your next appointment is the week of January whatever to whatever, March whatever to whatever, the week of. They no longer say a specific date. And he's tweaked this. This is the way he used to do it, and he found that it works even better. Instead of saying Tuesday of the certain day, he says the week of. So your next appointment will be the week of. When it comes to having your winter tires put on, it'll be the week of October 4th or 24th or whatever. Having them take off will be the week of. And he found that the difference between the day specifically and the week of works better. And here's what they do. They call the customer the week before and say your appointment is next week, which day works for you? And they find they're getting more people that keep that appointment because now they're in control and have an option. So you call me and say, Kelly, your appointment to have those tires put on is next week, or your appointment for your oil change is next week, or your appointment for your timing belt, or whatever it is next week. Which day works best for you? And they ask the customer, they go, oh, Tuesday works or Thursday works. And I'm telling you that without exaggeration, they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pre-booked appointments. That's the way they run the shop. I've seen how they do it, and it's simply a little card attached. The card actually does the sales for them, and they simply say, your next appointment is the week of. The customer says, okay, they leave. They call them the week before, and he tells me that works even better than the way that we just mentioned. So you can start the way we just mentioned, or you could take it that one step further and say the week of. Almost done here. Some of the tools for pre-booking appointments. One of my clients up in Ontario, in Barrie, Ontario, I was at a shop one day, and he started pre-booking appointments. And I saw it happen. This lady came in to pick up her car, and he handed her her invoice, and she paid him, and he took a toothbrush and handed her a toothbrush. And she said, Ed, what's the toothbrush for? And he said, we're like the dentist. We've already gone ahead and made your next appointment. And I thought, what a brilliant way to do it. It's instant education, because now I go, oh, you're like the dentist. And that's what he does. He gives people toothbrushes. In fact, I did a session in Las Vegas. It was the first time that anybody had ever seen the CarQuest and Worldpac logos on one item together. They had bought them, but everything was separate, and we had toothbrushes on everybody's seat, and they had the CarQuest and the Worldpac logo. And there were people in the morning that came to the class. It was a full day class, and they said, what's with the toothbrush? I said, I'll explain it later. And at the end of the day, I actually had Ed come up, him and his wife, and she's passed away sadly since. But anyway, they both came up, and I interviewed them in front of the whole group, and I said, can you please tell them what the toothbrush is for? And he said, well, you're in Vegas, you probably didn't brush your teeth last night, you need a toothbrush. He said, I'm kidding, but he explained what he does, and people loved the idea. And it's just kind of interesting to see people say, CarQuest and Worldpac together, one logo on one item, happened to be a toothbrush. But the toothbrushes work. You can order them from any company that puts logos on anything. I've actually had some people get them from their dentist, and that helps the dentist marketing say, oh yeah, you can hand out my toothbrushes. Whichever way you do it, hand out the toothbrushes. It's an instant education. By the way, the other thing I want to mention here is because that lady said, oh, I see that appointment's on a Wednesday. Would it be possible, Ed, for me to come in on a Thursday instead? That works better for me. And he said yes. And he changed the oil change sticker. He printed another one with the new date and put it on the car. We put stickers on car that says your next oil change should be what month and day and the mileage. Well, why don't we just go ahead and make the appointment? Instead of saying November, we can simply say your appointment is November 7th, Thursday, November 7th at 8:15 or whatever it might be. So instead of just telling them when they should come back as a suggestion, the oil change sticker, so when a person looks up the oil change sticker, they go, oh, my appointment's on June 8th at 8:15. They don't just know that it's whatever mileage. And again, mileage changes because of the hours that we've already talked about. I had one fellow who kept on forgetting to ask people about the next appointment. So he put a sign up that said, please ask about your discount if we fail to book your next appointment. I'm not hugely fan of that one, but that's what he tried. One shop I was at, I've seen several do it, but they provide a cash spiff for each appointment booked, and they run a weekly contest. It's a shop in Halifax, actually Moncton, Nova Scotia, or New Brunswick, sorry. And he has two advisors, and he gives them $1 each for each pre-booked appointment. So they track it at the end of the day, and at the end of the week, they give them cash, which they still track through the books. It's not cash under the table, but it's an extra little bit of cash, which is cash specifically for them. They don't have to share it for whoever else sees that paycheck, if you know what I mean. And so they get that cash spiff, but at the end of the week, whoever has the most gets a restaurant certificate or lunch bought for them. So that's another way of doing it. I had a fellow who was in one of our management groups in Seattle, and we had our meeting. We have live meetings once a month, and then we meet online every other month. And it was the online meeting. His name's Keith, and he said, Keith, he said, oh my God, he said, I hate that we're doing this today. I said, why? He said, well, that's our deadline. And he said, my service and I as advisor, so I'm talking too fast here. My advisor and I have the same amount of pre-booked appointments. And he said, whoever wins at the end of the week, the loser has to buy them lunch. So he said, if he wins, then I have to buy him lunch on Friday. And he said, we're pretty close. And we're on the call, we're reviewing the composite, and he goes, oh, stink. He just came in and held up a finger like he's got one more, not the middle finger, and then another one. So during that one call, he came in twice. He said, he put up his finger twice. He's got 2 more appointments than I, so I need to get back on the counter and start pre-booking more appointments. So they made it fun. So some people do the cash spiff, some people do the weekly amount. I saw some people who they provided a certificate for $1 amount, like $10 towards a service. One shop I was in, they actually give the customer a lottery ticket. If you pre-book that next appointment, then you get a lottery ticket. Now, because I mentioned the $1 in and $7 out, and I talked about 3 hours per work order, I wanted to reiterate, I'm not going to go through all of this. We covered it last time, the service advisors, benchmarks, and ratios, but I wanted to provide the information here about number of hours in a day, the proficiency, what the sales should be per month, Vehicle inspections, we're covering more of that next time in the time after in the webinars. And selling inspections is going to help you pre-book appointments. Selling factor recommended service is definitely going to help you in pre-booking appointments. And I did talk about the fact that you should have 6 times your labor rate, 3 hours in labor for the dollars for that. So the hourly rate times 3, multiply that by 2, and that adds the sales of the parts, the labor, the sublet, etc. So all of those ratios are there for you as well. Just in case for people who were not here last week and didn't see that information, I want to make it clear about the gross profit percentages, what those are, and the goal for sales of labor and parts, etc. Our next session, and I will try definitely to be on time next time, improved communications with our customers and technicians, is on Wednesday, November 30th. So yes, we are pre-booking your next appointment, making it hopefully convenient for you and for us. And of course, the session's recorded. You're going to get this emailed to you tomorrow. I did set up that group last time so that each time there's correspondence between meetings or attachments to training, anything else with the webinars, any additional handouts. For example, the $1,200, I will be sending that to you tonight. What I have to do is take the recording that we're just recording right now, convert it to another file, upload it to YouTube. It takes about an hour to do that. I will be doing that, and then I will send that link to you so you can watch this again and again. You can even pause me or rewind me, and you can also, you'll also get the $1,200 handout that I just looked at. So next Wednesday, November 30th at 8 p.m. By the way, I noticed today that because I'm in a different time zone, it changed the link sent to you saying it was 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. I appreciate they're trying to make it simpler, so I just changed my clock on my computer to be Eastern Time, and it'll be simpler from now on. I'll make sure that always happens. Topics include, we're going to be taking a look at avoiding problems caused by a lack of communication. How many problems are caused at your shop because of a lack of communication between the customer, the advisor, the tech and the advisor, and back to the customer. We're going to take a look at 7 major forms of communication. That's new information. Not anybody in this class has actually seen that particular material before. We're going to take a look at the forms of communication and how much miscommunication happens. It's harder to communicate with people today than ever before. I personally don't recall the last time I've had a conversation with each of my 3 adult kids that did not involve them texting and being on their phones. I'm staying at a buddy's place here in Vancouver, and the distractions with the phone are incredible. I had lunch with my brother the other day, and he was on his phone playing solitaire. No, not solitaire. That'd be one person. He was playing Scrabble with people from around the world, and I thought, can we just have lunch? Like, yeah, we have to be doing something. The point is, it's harder to get people's attention now than it ever has been before. So we're going to take a look at the 7 forms of communication for your customer, making the whole sales process easier. We're going to take a look at advanced selling skills. How do we get the customer off the phone into the counter? And improve repair or communication dispatching from your technicians and more. So next Wednesday, it's 8 o'clock. If you get an email and it says 5 o'clock Eastern or PST, our calls are always 8 o'clock. So with that, we're done. I apologize that I went over. I greatly apologize that I went over. I added that information actually earlier today. I thought I should take this email and bite-size it. And so that's what took me longer to get through than I would normally do. And it's actually the first time I've taught this workshop exactly succinctly in this amount of time. Again, what we're doing is going through a full series of 5-day classes and bite-sizing them into separate workshops so that we can bite-size and take 90 minutes, or in this case 2 hours at a time. The sessions usually go 2 hours because of the question period. So with that, we're done. I'm going to open up this to questions. If you've got any questions, you can simply send them to me right now. I'm going to keep the recording going so that for those of you that are listening in, or the people that are on the call, then you're coming back to this, then you can see the other questions that people asked. So any questions that you've got, please just send them along and I'll respond to those. And Susan had sent me a comment. We've gotten a text phone on the front counter because people now want to be texted, and that's correct. A lot of people would rather get a text than a phone call. A lot of people at work, they can't be on their phone, but they can use texts. And I don't have many phone conversations with my teenagers. It's almost all text. my son will send me a text and go, oh, he's available, and I'll call him and he won't answer because you can text several people at the same time, but only talk to one person at the same time. So yes, Susan, we're living in a texting world, and texting is one of the 7 forms of communication. Susan says, didn't want staff using their personal phone. And that makes sense. I see what you're saying. So there's a company phone that's on the counter, a company cell phone, and that way allows you to have them not be on their own personal phone. So you can tell when they're actually texting somebody for work about their car rather than their friend about something unrelated. Other questions? I just want to see here. Now, Kevin, you're still on the online. I'm trying to unmute you, but for some reason, okay, I just unmuted absolutely everybody. So if it's too loud,
I'm on my phone.
You're on your phone. Okay, I'm just going to, if there's noise in the background, I'm just going to have to go back and, okay, hopefully that was the one. Okay, Kevin?
Yes.
Can you just quickly tell me, how does, you've been listening into this, how does this work? I hope that's not your noise in the background. How does this integrate into GemCar? I mean, you know GemCar really well. I'm just learning it. How does this work? Oh, that. Kevin?
Yes, I'm here.
Sorry,
can you hear me?
Yeah, I just don't know if that's your noise that's in the background.
No, it's quiet here. There's nothing going on behind me.
I can't really tell because everybody else is muted, so I don't know what's going on. Okay, so you can go ahead. If you could just tell us, how does this pre-booking work in software? I mean, not just GemCar, other of us do it as well, but...
Francois? I can hear Francois.
But Francois, I've got muted.
Yeah, but he's, I think, on his phone.
Okay,
So, yeah, quiet man.
Francois, he's doing 3 things at the same time like we just talked about.
Yeah.
I see him muted, exactly. And I have no idea why he's still there.
I'll just send him a note here. We'll see if it works in your phone.
I just tried something else. And okay, so I just want to know, in software, what are the things that you could use as tools in software to help you do this? Like, you're watching this for the first time, and yet you've worked with GemCar a lot. So as I'm talking, you're obviously thinking about how the software enables you to help you with this. So can you talk about, so I don't just mean GemCar, it's not a commercial for GemCar, it's just talking about how we can use software to enhance what we're doing here.
Yeah, no, it's, I was excited about it. I actually had a personal experience where my daughter came from college or university, and she's home for the Thanksgiving weekend down here in the States. So I had a window of a day and a half in order to have repairs done on her vehicle before she had to get it back, because she's going to be leaving on Sunday to go back to school on Monday. So one of my GemCar customers, same type of thing. I had to get a hold of him, and I said, oh, but you know, it needs an oil change. We go through the rest of it. Everything that you're talking about, Kelly, is so true. I'm like my paper. I'm on both sides of the sheet as I'm taking notes, going through it. It's all about communication, right? So in software, really for us, we like to think that we give the service facility or the shop the ability to talk to the customer and communicate with them at the point of decision. So they have all the information in front of them, whatever the deferred work is, whatever the recommended services are, preventative maintenance. When that customer is making contact with us, we're able to connect with them and say that, you know, here is the work and here's what we're recommending that you need to have done. Would you like to have that taken care of today? So if it's putting it into the calendar and recommending it, we have that interactive scheduler, that calendar, to be able to put them in. And I think most softwares now are getting better about that. You know, if Michaela, my daughter, is coming in and she's coming in for an oil change or an LOF, as you said, labor of the future. Is that what the acronym that you came up with?
Yeah.
labor opportunity of the future.
Yeah.
She's scheduling that work. To have a customer actually call you and say, I would like to bring my vehicle in for this particular service, it's almost backwards. How often do we have that? I mean, if we're waiting for that to happen, that's a great problem to have, where people are calling us to bring their vehicles in. I mean, if my shop, it was exactly that case. I was like, okay, she's got that sticker on her window. It's been a year. We've had a year's opportunity to have the vehicle for a safety inspection, and it's due. If it can't be done this weekend for Thanksgiving, then I'm going to have to bring it back on the Christmas week. Could we please schedule that? But I want to have it taken care of today. So for us with GemCar, at the point of decision when I was calling them, there should have been 2 or 3 reminders that came up right up there that said, Kevin is due for his 3rd vehicle, right? Because my wife's vehicle, my vehicle, I have an antique automobile, and then I also have my daughter's vehicle that is serviced by this fleet. It would have been nice to say, oh, hey, Kevin, you're talking about the oil change. My records show that you're also due for the safety inspection. Would you like to have that taken care of at the same time? And if they had scheduled that with me 6 months ago, it would have been a godsend. And it is completely possible with the software. We just have to be a little more proactive and make sure that, okay, you did this today. Let's include that the next time that you come, propose and reschedule the work.
But what I'm looking at as well is, can I book an appointment? For example, let's say today I put winter tires on a customer's vehicle, and I've made an appointment for them to come off March 30th. Can
Yes.
I tell it today to send them an email reminder automatically without even thinking about it again?
For us, it is a triggered event. The linkage has to trigger that, and that's what I call the person from the keyboard to the floor, that it has to be triggered. And we make it part of our training that it's done when the billing statements are done or the payables are done, that you send out your reminders so that it's not automatic. And the reason that is because some customers are fleet customers, and they'll have 20 to 30 vehicles that you'll be servicing. If you blasted them with 30 emails,
yeah,
it would be overwhelming to them. So it's not automatic in the sense that it does it automatically. It is a trigger that has to happen, but we do it on a monthly basis or on a weekly basis, and it's part of the training that we offer. It's built into it. But yes, if I schedule, we have the technology where it is triggered and it's scheduled today for March, and then how that's triggered, whether it's text or by email, yes, the technology is there, and it can happen automatically. We recommend that you don't set it like Ronco, set it and forget it, because sometimes you'll have customers that have multiple vehicles that don't want to get 4 emails, and then you get black flag like it's spam.
but to understand what you're saying is it's triggered. So at some point, let's say in February, when I'm doing whatever, I'm going to be reminded to send that. Is that what you're saying? You said
yes.
Like at the end
yes.
of February, for example, if
Yep.
you've trained me that when I'm doing whatever you just mentioned, it's going to pull up those reminders.
Yeah.
Okay.
You would send out your accounts receivable. You would mail out all your statements to your customers.
Yeah.
You would write all the checks to your parts suppliers, your payables.
Yeah.
And then the next step would be to send your reminders,
okay,
whether they by email or by paper. Yes.
Okay. So whatever point you've trained me to do it, let's say it's month end, those reminders are going to be there. But I'm assuming I could go in at any time and see. If I looked at March, would that appointment show up on a schedule?
Yes.
Okay, it would. So if I looked at March, I would be able to see everything pre-booked for March on one schedule?
Correct.
Okay, I wasn't sure about that. So I can start to look ahead and see. I wouldn't want to overbook a day, so I could look ahead and go, okay, Tuesday's super busy.
Tuesday's not good. Right, exactly.
Okay,
yes, absolutely.
Okay. Dentists do that. I'm amazed when you go to a dentist and they say, let's make an appointment a year out, and you see their schedule and you realize, oh my goodness, they're going to have to find a day for me. Oh no, Tuesday's not going to work. Or I remember one time I was there and she said, okay, you're going to have to see the dentist that day, not just the hygienist. So I need to book a day that you can do both at the same time. And she had to look at 2 different weeks to be able to do that. And I thought, that's a year from now.
Braces are the same way. Both my children have, my son is currently in braces. My daughter just had them off, but she still has follow-up appointments. And the orthodontist is only in on certain days in my local office. He's there on every other Friday. So when I schedule a follow-up, or I want to make sure that, that he gets new wires and just like exactly what you're talking about. There's certain days that he's there, and it's every other Friday, and I live in, like, 2/3 of the state's population lives in my community, like where I live. So it's really busy. So you got to be sure that you schedule far enough ahead, just like what you're talking about, Kelly. It's great
Well,
seminar. I really enjoyed your webinar tonight very much.
we planned things better than we ever have in the past because life wasn't so busy before. But now
Yeah.
we're busier than we've ever been. It's just crazy. Okay, any other questions? Now, again, my email, kelly@kellythecoach.com. If you've got any questions after a class, I will be sending out the information. Sherry, I see that you're online. I'm going to add you to my group, my Google group here, which means you're going to be able to get all the links there and also any communication from other members. So if at any time any of you have something that you would like to add, something that you've learned, something you've done, you can go and put a comment into that start a new conversation in that link, and then everybody will get it. So the idea is to be able to share this information with each other, from each other. Like, none of us knows everything, but together, boy, we know a lot of stuff. So we're not islands unto our own. We learn from other people all the time. Kevin, you've taught me a huge amount of stuff. It's neat to learn. I think not a day goes by that we don't learn something from somebody. Okay, with that, everybody, thank you very much. One more time, I apologize for going over. We went almost 2 hours there. And so we'll see you next week. Any questions in the interim, it's Kelly@kellythecoach.com. With that, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.